several young people is playing Spin the Bottle, where players must kiss the person pointed to by the opening. The freely brunette finds kissing not thrilling enough. She leads the selected black man into the back room. In the darkness, a pair of eyes appear, and Pandora's box has been opened. The game of death has officially begun. In a small town in Texas in 1978, a group of teenagers is having a party at Ida's house. The young people are looking for excitement together. They want to play games in the basement, but she blocks the door and refuses to open it. The heartthrob Carter pleads, and Ida has no choice but to open the door. The basement is actually a prayer room, filled with various ritual tools. Ida fears being seen as a freak, so she begs everyone to go upstairs. If her father finds out they entered the prayer room, the result would be unimaginable. Unfortunately, no one listened to Ida. A girl named Corrine found a bottle from the booth, and suggested playing Spin the Bottle. The scene shifted outside the villa, where a priest drove up to Ida's house. He knocked on the door, but not been responded to, because the young people in the basement are immersed in the bottle game. The game is merely an excuse to cover up intimacy. Ida watches the heartthrob kiss Corrine, and her anger grew stronger. The bottle on the ground sways strangely, emitting a stream of white smoke from its mouth. Suddenly, the entire house began to shake, and the group finally sensed that something was wrong. The priest went around to the side of the house, and looked into the basement, discovering that Ida was pushing Corrine down from a distance. The other youths also disappeared in an instant. Years passed quickly, and the property was left to Ida's sister. Since she had to recuperate in a nursing home, Cole planned to drop out of school, and move to the house in Jenningstown. He had already contacted the electricity and gas companies. He also sent his transcripts to the local Oak Ridge High School. Once his mother's recovery period was over, Cole would bring her to live with him. His mother knew that her son had made up his mind, and she warned him not to enter the basement. Soon after, Cole arrived in the town. He arrived at the house where his mother had lived, and the doors and windows were boarded up. The basement, as his mother had mentioned, was locked. The house was filled with many photographs, and although Cole found the place eerie, it was still livable. Soon, he left home to attend the team tryouts. As soon as Cole stepped onto the field, he caught the attention of the cheerleaders. The team manager, Casey, came to help him fill in a form. The coach wanted Cole to play, and his performance did not disappoint. The team members sensed a crisis, and decided to teach the newcomer a lesson. However, the more the veteran players tried to hinder him, the more impressive Cole's performance became. Just as the game ended, Mira and Sophie came to invite Cole. Tonight, gathering with the team members would help enhance their chemistry. They had already given their reasons, so Cole naturally wouldn't refuse. Casey, along with the team's Kevin and Dean, joined them soon. Cole's house became the gathering place, since it was free of parental interference. When everyone followed Cole to the destination, they discovered that he lived in a murder house. In the 1970s, a group of teenagers died here, and everyone in town had heard about it. His mother had warned Cole not to tell anyone he was one of this family, so he lied that his parents had bought the house. He planned to renovate it and then sell it off. As soon as they entered, they saw a portrait of Ida. She was the infamous murderer from the legend. If someone doesn't seek death, they cannot become the protagonist of a horror film. The group of young people was not deterred by the eerie atmosphere, and instead, they wanted to explore the murder scene in the basement. Cole didn't want to go against his mother's warning, but the boys teased him for being a mama's boy. Mira boldly smashed open the lock, and the six of them entered the dust-covered basement. The lighting inside was long overdue for repair. With only a dim ceiling light still running, Mira walked into the booth, and saw the bottles in the room. She introduced Sophie to the girl named Ida, who had suffered abuse from her father for many years. During the Spin the Bottle game, she was provoked by her peers, which led her to snap and kill everyone. However, in the end, Ida chose to commit suicide, which is truly a tragedy. Mira was not afraid of death, and she picked up the bottle. Mira was ready to recreate the game, and she even removed the cork from the bottle. A wisp of smoke flowed out, and the girls were not afraid. The three boys felt embarrassed to refuse, and had no choice but to agree to Myra's suggestion. The rules of the game were still as simple as before. Whoever the bottle pointed at had to kiss that person. If unwilling, they had to take a drink as punishment. Sophie and Casey both liked Cole, and had been comparing silently. At that moment, the room suddenly trembled. When it was Myra's turn to spin the bottle, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her finger. Mira thought it was just static electricity, so she didn't think much. The bottle eventually pointed at Kevin, and Mira pulled him into the booth. Although Kevin didn't mind such things, he found the place too eerie, and suggested moving to another room. But Mira liked it. A face flashed in the darkness suddenly, and then Mira screamed. she running out without her clothes. Mira was convinced that she had heard the voice of the deceased girl. She was startled. Mira prepared to leave. Kevin, worried about her, chased after her. Sophie, hearing this, stuffed the bottle into her bag. Outside, Mira called a taxi, but the driver couldn't come right now. Kevin tried to persuade her to wait for Baron, so they could leave together later. Coincidentally, the taxi arrived just then. Mira said goodbye to Kevin, and got into the car alone, urging the driver to go faster. She looked around terrifically, and noticed a shadow sitting next to her. Upon closer inspection, it was none other than Ida. Mira jumped out of the car with scream, and the driver thought that he had encountered a madwoman, so he sped away. Mira was left stranded in the wilderness. The game atmosphere was shattered, and the others lost interest in playing. After saying goodbye to Cole, everyone left, while Mira prepared to call her friends. She heard Ida's voice again, repeatedly mumbling, "You don't deserve him." Mira was frightened and ran to a streetlight, but Ida chased after her from the darkness. Soon after, her friends drove by nearby, unaware of Myra's body. Cole slept on the sofa all night, dreaming of his father and Ida. Cole was awakened by a knock on the door, and it was the town's police officer, who was also Casey's father. He was in charge of investigating Myra's disappearance, so he traced the taxi records to find him here. Cole answered the officer's questions, admitting that the original owner was his grandfather, and recounting the events of the last night. After taking notes, the officer drove away, and Cole wandered around the house. He discovered a hole in a painting on the wall, and went around to the back of it. He slowly approached the room by the door, and heard a whispering sound. He was about to walk closely to hear, when his phone suddenly vibrated. It was Casey calling, and she said the news of Myra's disappearance had spread. There were rumors claiming he was a member of the Randall family, the house's owners. Casey advised Cole to seek refuge at Dean's house. When Cole arrived at Dean's house, he found Dean shooting targets with Kevin for fun. Soon, the two approached Cole with guns, demanding to know who he was, and why he had taken them to his house last night.
I don't know a thing. I don't know a
It turned out that Dean was joking and teasing him, which angered Cole. Kevin stepped in to mediate, and Sophie came with a beer. She urged both of them not to get upset. Cole couldn't understand how they could still be in the mood to have fun, and shouldn't they be looking for Mira? Kevin reassured Cole not to worry, saying that Mira was a determined girl, and wouldn't just disappear. Despite this, Cole was still somewhat concerned, and asked the three of them if they had heard any strange sounds lately, like a woman's whisper or crying. Dean laughed mockingly, saying he was scared silly. Cole felt that he couldn't communicate with these people. Cole went straight back to the house, and searched for information about the house, which was all about murder news. It also mentioned that a priest had witnessed the murder scene involving Ida. He was engrossed in reading, when Cole heard a knock on the door. Casey walked in anxiously, and she wasn't as optimistic as Kevin and the others. Casey was very worried about Mira. The two decided to return to the basement, and Casey asked Cole if he was a member of the Randall family. Cole could only admit that Ida was his mother's sister. At the time of the incident, Cole's mother was still an infant. Fortunately, Casey was not afraid after learning the truth. They entered the basement, and found that the bottles on the floor were gone. Then, Casey saw something flash by, and she grabbed Cole's hand in fear. They heard a strange sound, but a cry for help from upstairs interrupted them. The two quickly returned upstairs, and Casey opened the door to check outside. She saw Sophie lying on the ground, and her face covered in blood. Casey was at a loss for what to do, when Kevin and Dean appeared with their phones. It was just a prank. Cole was angry, and tackled Dean, giving him a beating. Kevin quickly stopped the two. At that moment, Casey received a call from her father, who said the police had found Myra's body. The girl's death was gruesome, but the police concluded that she had committed suicide. Casey did not believe that Mira would take her own life. They went together to attend her funeral. Myra's family, and even the entire town, suspected that Cole was the murderer, because he had Randall's blood. The sheriff saw that the situation was about to lose control. He quickly pulled Cole away, and he saying the town was backward and ignorant. They didn't care whether you were the murderer or not. The sheriff warned Cole to leave the area. Then he went home to comfort his daughter. Casey, he explained that there were no fingerprints or fibers on the deceased, which could only indicate suicide. Casey interrupted her father, saying she didn't want to stay at home. Casey went to Baron's house for keep vigil for Mira. When she got there, she saw that the vigil was no different from a party. A few influencers were taking photos with their phones, fearing they would miss the buzz surrounding Myra's death. Cole was slow dancing with Sophie, and their excuse was that they were healing each other. Casey felt a bit jealous, so she stood in a prominent spot, and called everyone to propose to toast. She said this toast was to commemorate Mira. Sophie echoed her sentiment, and pulled out the bottle she had taken that day. Sophie planned to continue playing Spin the Bottle. Casey and Cole didn't refuse, and perhaps only by reoccurring the events of that night could they figure out what had gone wrong. A cold wind swept through after several rounds of the game, and a sense of foreboding settled in their hearts. Cole suppressed his discomfort, and spun the bottle, which unexpectedly changed direction halfway. The bottle, which was originally pointing at Sophie, was now aimed at Casey. Sophie watched the two kiss intimately, feeling deeply hurt, but suddenly, a pair of hands reached over, saying, "It's your turn." She was startled and straightened up, ignoring it. Suddenly, the bottle pointed at her, and she hurriedly left the scene. Sophie planned to find Kevin, but a strange wind swept though along the way. The ghostly figure of Ida reappeared. Sophie ran around like a fly, eventually bumping into Kevin. She cried, saying she had seen Ida. Kevin comforted the girl in his arms, and sparks of romance ignited between them. He had already forgotten his girlfriend Mira, while Ida was watching them standing in the shadows. Meanwhile, Cole and Casey speculated that the Spin the Bottle game could summon the deceased Ida. That's why Mira was scalded by the bottle while playing the game. She said seeing something terrifying. To ensure safety, Cole decided to bury the bottle the next morning. Meanwhile, Dean participated in the game. Suddenly, he heard an alarm sound. Dean went outside with the car keys to check. He discovered that the car had been blaring the alarm. Dean jumped into the car to turn off the noise, but then, whispers came from the woods. "Let's play." Dean raised his shotgun upon hearing this, his heart racing, nervously scanning his surroundings. Dean was suddenly grabbed by a pair of hands that snapped his neck. The female influencer, noticing Dean hadn't returned, went outside to look for him. She saw Dean's lifeless body. When she approached the pickup truck with the lights on, the influencer rushed back inside, only to encounter Ida's ghost. The next morning, the sheriff knocked on Cole's door, delivering the news of Dean and the influencer's deaths. Since the deceased had fought with Cole before his death, Cole was considered a suspect now. Cole hurriedly defended himself, saying he had been home all night. The sheriff asked if he had any evidence, and just then, his daughter emerged from Cole's bedroom, and her clothes were disheveled. This proved that Cole had no time to commit the crime. The sheriff was angry, and ordered Casey to wait in the car. The sheriff didn't actually dislike Cole, but he wouldn't allow his daughter to get entangled with the Randalls. The sheriff told Cole that his grandfather, Fred Randall, was a monster. Those closing to him would disappear. Even the gardener and kitchen help, and anyone who had worked for Fred, would suddenly go missing one day. Casey's grandmother was one of them. The sheriff didn't want his daughter to have any ties to the Randall family. Casey was unable to hear the conversation between the two sitting in the car, because she was in the wrong. Casey could only follow her father away. Cole planned to go to the sanatorium to talk with his mother. He needed to learn more about his family history. From their conversation, it was clear that the Randall family had always been very devout. Cole's mother's great-grandfather established the first Pentecostal church in the town. However, Cole's grandfather, Fred, was expelled from the church due to different beliefs. Fred became infatuated with a cult, believing that his mission was to conquer demons. He even built a small chapel in the cellar, leading worshippers there. The Randall family had always had a tendency to attract demons. Fred firmly believed that he could control this power. Fred even used Ida to lure and tame demons.
My father did horrible things. He did horrible things to her.
In summary, Fred sealed the demon in the bottle by sacrificing Ida. This was also why Ida was able to use the demon to kill her friends. That day she snapped. Now, Cole and the others had awakened it, and the only way to end everything was to destroy the bottle. Cole took the bottle, and went to his great-grandfather's church. Father Harris, who witnessed Ida's attack back then, still remained in the small church. On that night in 1978, he sought out Ida to help guide the girl back to the right path. Unfortunately, Ida was insulted by the boy she loved, and she became angry. The demon seized the opportunity to possess her. The priest arrived too late, and could only watch when several children were brutally killed. The priest rushed into the basement to find Ida, who was leaning over her companions, devouring their souls. Harris refused to give up on the girl, and took out a cross to help drive away the demon. But when Ida regained consciousness, she couldn't accept the reality of killing. Ida chose to end her own life. Just as he finished speaking, Casey and the others arrived at the church. They were participants in the game, and had the right to know the truth. Sophie heard the story Harris told, and couldn't know whether the thing in the bottle was a demon or Ida's ghost. The priest explained that both of them existed because Ida's soul had long been consecrated to the demon by her father. They were inherently intertwined. At that time, Fred feared vengeance from his daughter, so he could just seal the bottle in the basement. The Randall bloodline awakened Ida till Cole appeared, and the demon residing in her soul once again. Only by helping Ida reclaim her soul could the demon lose its host and retreat into the bottle. Then, by simply burning the bottle, they could end this nightmare.
Only a Randall can entrap the demon, and it's only a Randall that can defeat him.
The four protagonists readied to join forces against the demon. To rescue Ida's trapped soul, they returned to the basement to continue the game. When Casey and Cole kissed, the bottle reacted most strongly. This was because there was true love between them, the love that Ida had always longed for. The two safely passed the first round of the game. When it was Sophie's turn, the bottle suddenly became scalding. This was similar to the situation before Myra's murder. Sophie saw Ida in the shadows and hid in a cubicle. Ida pounced on Sophie, draining her soul. Kevin, having lost the two most important people to him, began firing wildly. The bullets shattered the pipes overhead. Kevin chased the ghostly figure upstairs, faintly hearing Myra's cries for help. Following the sound, Kevin arrived at the bedroom, where he saw a figure under the blanket. Kevin lifted the thin blanket with his courage, and he found Myra lying there, crying. Just as Kevin was about to ask what happened, Myra suddenly became Ida. Cole heard the screams by the time, and rushed to the scene. Kevin had already been dragged downstairs. Ida pinned him down, and drained him thoroughly. In the blink of an eye, only two protagonists remained. Cole did not fear Ida, and he slowly approached the girl. They shared the same bloodline. Cole took out Ida's childhood doll, and explained that he was Maura's son. No matter what happened, my mother and I love you very much, because we are family. Ida, who had longed for love all her life, finally experienced its sweetness. Her soul overcame the demon. Ida's eyes gradually regained their clarity. Then Ida vanished into the night sky, and the white mist slipped back into the bottle. At that moment, the sheriff was downstairs calling for his daughter. Cole told Casey to leave first, and tossed the bottle into the fireplace. The flames ignited the leaking gas from the pipes, causing an explosion in an instant. Fortunately, the three of them were safe, and the nightmare finally came to an end. From the title point at someone and they die, one can infer the entire plot. Although the film runs for 2 hours, the story is quite simple. If some unnecessary scenes were trimmed, the viewing experience could be much better. The director aimed to create a horror atmosphere by keeping the lights mostly off. However, the horror element didn't come through, and it just felt straining on the eyes after watching. The actors clearly looked like small stars, but their acting was not as good as what we see in today's short dramas. If you enjoy my channel, please click subscribe.